Good Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for October the 7th. Today, we're going to be finishing up the text of 2 Kings, looking together in chapters 24 and 25. So let me get that text on the screen. Another decently lengthy reading today. So we'll go ahead and get to working through it here. 2 Kings chapter 24, verse number 1. During Jehoiakim's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon attacked. Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. Yahweh sent Chaldean, Aramaean, Moabites, and Ammonite raiders against Jehoiakim. He sent him against Judah to destroy it, according to the word Yahweh had spoken through his servants, the prophets. Indeed, this happened to Judah at Yahweh's command to remove them from his presence. It was because of the sins of Manasseh, according to all he had done, and also because of the innocent blood he had shed. He had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and Yahweh was not willing to forgive. The rest of the events of Jehoiakim's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. Jehoiakim rested with his ancestors, and his son Jehoiachin became king in his place. Now the king of Egypt did not march out of his land again, for the king of Babylon took everything that had belonged to the king of Egypt, from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Nehushta, daughter of Elnathan. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was evil in Yahweh's sight, just as his father had done. At that time, the servants of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon marched up to Jerusalem, and the city came under siege. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to the city while his servants were besieging it. King Jehoiachin of Judah, along with his mother, his servants, his commanders, and his officials, surrendered to the king of Babylon. So the king of Babylon took him captive in the 8th year of his reign. He also carried off from there all the treasures of Yahweh's temple and all the treasures of the king's palace, and he cut into pieces all the gold articles that King Solomon of Israel had made for Yahweh's sanctuary, just as Yahweh had predicted. He deported all Jerusalem and all the commanders of the best soldiers, 10,000 captives, including all the craftsmen and metalsmiths. Except for the poorest people of the land, no one remained. Nebuchadnezzar deported Jehoiachin to Babylon. He took the king's mother, the king's wives, his officials, and the leading men of the land into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. The king of Babylon brought the captive into Babylon, all 7,000 of the best soldiers, 1,000 craftsmen and metalsmiths, all strong and fit for war. And the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old whenever he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. Zedekiah did what was evil in Yahweh's sight, just as Jehoiakim had done. Because of Yahweh's anger, it came to the point in Jerusalem and Judah that he finally banished them from his presence. Then Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. 2 Kings chapter 25, in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon advanced against Jerusalem with his entire army. He laid siege to the city and built a siege wall against it all around. The city was under siege until King Zedekiah's 11th year. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was so severe in the city that the common people had no food. Then the city was broken into, and all the warriors fled at night by way of the city gates between the 2 walls near the king's garden, even though the Chaldeans surrounded the city. As the king made his way along the route to the Arabah, the Chaldean army pursued him and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. Zedekiah's entire army left him and scattered. The Chaldeans seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah, and they passed sentence on him. They slaughtered Zedekiah's sons before his eyes. And finally, the king of Babylon blinded Zedekiah, bound him in bronze chains, and took him to Babylon. On the 7th day of the 5th month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guards, a servant of the king of Babylon, entered Jerusalem. He burned Yahweh's temple, the king's palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He burned down all the great houses. The whole Chaldean army, from the captain of the guards, tore down the walls surrounding Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guards, supported the rest of the people who remained in the city, the deserters who had defected to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the population. But the captain of the guards left some of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and farmers. Now the Chaldeans broke into pieces the bronze pillars of Yahweh's temple, the water carts, and the bronze basin, which were in Yahweh's temple, and carried the bronze to Babylon. They also took the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, dishes, and all the bronze articles used in the priest's service. The captain of the guards took away the fire pans and the sprinkling basins, whatever was gold or silver. As for the two pillars, the one basin, and the water carts that Solomon had made for Yahweh's temple, the weight of the bronze of all those articles was beyond measure. One pillar was 27 feet tall and had a bronze capital on top of it. The capital, encircled by a grating and pomegranates of bronze, stood 5 feet high. The second pillar was the same, with its own grating. The captain of the guards also took away Sariah, the chief priest, Zephaniah, the priest of the second rank, and the 3 doorkeepers. From the city, he took a court official who had been appointed over the warriors, 5 trusted royal aides found in the city, the secretary of the commander of the army who enlisted the people of the land for military duty, the 60 men from the common people who were found within the city, and the 60 men from the common people who were found within the city. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guards, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. The king of Babylon put them to death at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah went into exile from its land. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon appointed Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, son of Shaphan, over the rest of the people he left in the land of Judah. When the commanders of the armies, they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah, they came to Gedaliah at Mizpah. The commanders included Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Johanan, son of Kareah, Sariah, son of Tanhumath, and the Netophathite, and Jaazaniah, son of the Maakathite, they and their men. Gedaliah swore an oath to them and their men, assuring them, "Don't be afraid of the servants of the Chaldeans. Live in the land, serve the king of Babylon, and it will go well for you." Well, in the 7th month, however, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, son of Elishama of the royal family, came with 10 men and struck down Gedaliah, and he died. Also, they killed the Judeans and the Chaldeans who were with him at Mizpah. Then all the people, from the youngest to the oldest, and the commanders of the army, left and went to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldeans. On the 27th day of the 12th month of the 37th year of the exile of Judah's king Jehoiachin, in the year of Evil-Merodach became king of Babylon. He pardoned King Jehoiachin of Judah and released him from prison. He spoke kindly to him and set his throne over the thrones of the kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiachin changed his prison clothes, and he dined regularly in the presence of the king of Babylon for the rest of his life. As for his allowance, a regular allowance was given to him by the king, a portion for each day for the rest of his life. And that concludes our read through the text of 1 Kings and 2 Kings. Man, tough ending here for the kingdom of Judah. Let's break it down here for a few moments. We have initially King Nebuchadnezzar introduced to him. He comes during the reign of Jehoiachin, but he has to go away to deal with some business at his home. And while he does that, Jehoiachin rebels against him. Well, it's not as if God is just going to let the punishment that is coming against them because of the sins of Manasseh and because of the sins of the people to go unaddressed. So he ends up sending other people, not just the Chaldeans, but the Arameans, the Moabites, the Ammonites. They all come and they cause trouble for Jehoiachin in Judah. And again, all this was done by the word of Yahweh. This was the promise that he had made. Again, this promise was made because of the incredible sins of Manasseh, and the fact that the people, even during the good reign of Josiah that we saw yesterday, their hearts were not turned to Yahweh, and so he has no loyalty to them at all either. During this time as well, once Jehoiachin is taken away, or excuse me, this is Jehoiakim. I knew I was going to do that. This is Jehoiakim. Jehoiachin is going to come next. This is all during the reign of Jehoiakim. He ends up dying during all of this, and his son Jehoiachin becomes king. And the situation that he takes over is a pretty dire looking one. Remember the major nations at this time, or the major nation was Assyria. Yet Assyria was on the downslope of their power. Babylon was certainly on the upslope, or on the uptick, I should say. And Assyria, recognizing this, tries to join forces with Egypt. But that doesn't work at all. We saw that yesterday. Looking at here, let's see, pretty sure it was yesterday. It might have been the day previous to that. We looked at this rebellion. Let's see if I can find it real fast here. Oh yes, yeah. Talking about Josiah's death back in chapter 23 and verses 28 through 30. But Babylon ends up taking out both Assyria and Egypt. So Babylon is now the major power within this part of the world. Well, now we're about the year 597. Nebuchadnezzar comes back, and he's going to pretty much finish the job that was going to be started. Let's see here. I want to note this real fast. It's 586. I'll tell you why that year is important here in a second. But about 597, Nebuchadnezzar comes back. And this time he lays Jerusalem under a siege. And once Nebuchadnezzar actually comes himself, then Jehoiachin and those closest, his inner cabinet, you might say, they actually end up just straight up surrendering to Babylon, which in and of itself, honestly, probably the better idea for what should have been done, because again, this was punishment that was being brought on by Yahweh. We think about the messages of the prophets that were present during this time. I believe Jeremiah would have been one of the major ones. He let the people know, listen, this is the will of Yahweh. This is the punishment, and nothing's going to change. You just need to submit to Yahweh's discipline. You are being disciplined for the sins of the nation, and you need to accept that. So Jehoiachin, to his credit, basically does that here in this moment, and Nebuchadnezzar goes and ends up carrying away all the treasuries of Yahweh's temple. The temple at this time is raided, but we're going to see in the next chapter that it ends up finally being completely raided later on, whenever everything's taken away and the whole temple is burned to the ground. Anyways, he takes away the leadership. He also ends up taking away the people. I do want to mention this, that in verse 13, and this is important to recognize, that this was the fulfillment of the prophecy against Hezekiah back in chapter 20, verse 17. Remember, whenever he invited the Babylonian emissaries into his house and the temple and everything, and basically bragged and showed off all of his riches. And Isaiah told him, that because you've done this, all these things are going to be taken away to Babylon. Well, this is the fulfillment of that. So if you're marking your Bible at all, you might note here Proverbs 2 Kings 20 and verse 17. This is the fulfillment of that prophecy. So Nebuchadnezzar ends up taking away many of the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem at this time. There's a big deportation. I think many people think that this would have been when Daniel was taken away. Him and his comrades were taken away into captivity. All this takes place here, and eventually, with Jehoiachin being gone, there needed to be a new king, and the new king that was appointed by Nebuchadnezzar was Mattaniah, who is Jehoiachin's uncle. His name ends up being changed to Zedekiah. Well, in other texts that we could read, and in the prophets as well, we see that Zedekiah did not listen to the warnings of the prophet Jeremiah, and for that, he was considered to be one who did what was evil in Yahweh's sight, and Yahweh's anger was embroiled, and it came to the point, and this is a very sad statement, It came to the point in Jerusalem and Judah that he finally banished them from his presence. And then Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Zedekiah did not care at all for the welfare of God's people. He was simply looking out for national Judah. That was his only concern. He was a patriot of Judah. He was not a follower of Yahweh. For that reason, Judah was no longer being cared for by God as they had previously been cared for. That at this point, that is completely done. That period of their history is over with. So this point, as Zedekiah's reign continues on, Babylon once again comes against them, builds another siege wall, and they are under siege for about 2 years is the span. And it just goes in and tell about how everything takes place from that point on. How Zedekiah ends up taking off, he escapes, and it's very interesting that he makes it as far as the plains of Jericho. It's a full circle moment for the Israelites. Remember, Jericho was one of the first places where they had the conquest, and now they themselves are conquered. And we have a prophecy from Ezekiel chapter 12 and verse 13, which speaks about Zedekiah being taken into captivity, but yet not being able to see it. And you might wonder, that doesn't make very much sense. How could that be? Well, that can be in the fact that he was blinded by the king of Babylon. His sons were killed before his eyes. The very last thing his eyes saw were his sons being killed. He ends up being taken away into captivity. And you might notice that as we're going through this text, there's not really much emotion. There's not a lot of sorrow on the part of the author. He doesn't editorialize any of this. He just states all this as a matter of fact, because that's what this text is. It's a matter of fact. This is just telling you what took place during this time. If you want to see some of the emotion from those who endured it, you can go read the text of Lamentations, and that'll give you some emotional insight into what some were feeling while all of this was taking place. At this point, Jerusalem is destroyed. In verse number 9, this is Nebuzaradan. He ends up burning the temple. That's what took place in 586. 586, the temple is destroyed. The city is destroyed. Complete and total destruction of the city where Yahweh had put his name. Yet again, he would have drawn that because of the behavior of the people. All the things that were found within the temple, all the beautiful things were made into scrap metal. All the people, many of the people were taken to Riblah, where they ended up being killed. And you might put a note, you might highlight the end of verse number 21. That so Judah went into exile from the land. And that's it. They are entering into the time period of the covenant curses because of their unfaithfulness and disloyalty toward Yahweh and the covenants. At this point, King Nebuchadnezzar makes Gedaliah basically the governor of the land. He kind of sets him up as the leader of such. And there were some who remained within Judah who considered themselves patriots, and they were going to be the ones who resisted Babylonian rule no matter what. So whenever they hear Gedaliah say, hey, just chill out, don't be afraid of them, just live in the land, serve Babylon, we'll be fine. Again, the background information of this is we deserve this. We're receiving what we deserve for the sins that we had committed against Yahweh. And that's kind of, again, the background understanding here. Once he does this with them, they don't like that, specifically Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, the son of Elishama, who is of the royal family. He does not like this whatsoever. So he ends up assassinating Gedaliah. And then another full circle moment, all of those who are with him, the people, from the youngest to the oldest, the commanders, all of them, they end up going back to Egypt. So where the conquest had been undone with Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, so now the Exodus is being undone, where they escape back to Egypt. How sad for this once very blessed people to find themselves in this condition. And yet we know it is all a result of sin. The fact that they would not maintain loyalty to Yahweh and the covenants, that they did not show faithfulness to Yahweh, that they prostituted themselves with the pagan gods, with idols. And God, as their spiritual husband, again in the covenant sense, puts them away. allows them to continue to pursue their desires to their own detriment. And yet, here in verse 27, finishing out through verse 30, we see a glimmer of hope. Hope of maybe a impending new Exodus. For Jehoiachin, still alive. You go and you read about that in verse number 20. This goes all the way back to, what is it? Let's see here. Verse number, verse number 12. So verse number 12, let's see here. No, verse 15. Yeah, we'll do verse 15. Verse 15 talks about Nebuchadnezzar deported Jehoiachin to Babylon. All right. So this is years. Let's see. 18 years old. He reigned 3 months. This is 27 days, 37-ish years, 37 to 40 years. We see into the future now, from the telling of the historical downfall of Judah and Jerusalem, 37 years in the future about ish, we see that Jehoiachin is still alive. He's still being cared for in Babylon. And in fact, he's not just being cared for, he's really being very much well provided for. He is pardoned from his prison sentence. Again, that would have been just for being the king of a conquered nation. And he is given a place of prominence among the thrones of the kings. He no longer wears prison clothes. He is enjoying fine dining. He's even given a regular allowance. Why is this told? Why does the author of Kings feel it necessary to include this information? Again, think about this text. If this text is being written during the time of captivity, which I think it makes the most sense, that the matter of factness, especially of these latter chapters, is just that. It's just letting the recipients know this is why you are where you are. Well, you get to hear, you think, maybe there is hope. Maybe there's hope. And certainly there is, for Yahweh had promised that a remnant would remain. Because remember, there's still the greatest promise God ever made to Abraham, still out there waiting to be fulfilled, for his seed to be a blessing to all the nations. So as we turn the page from 2 Kings onward, we are left thinking of that, thinking of the hope and the little glimmer of hope that awaits in the future, seeing how God can redeem even such a people as this. Well, tomorrow we're going to begin a read in 1 Chronicles. I hope that you'll take some time to read along with me there. I think we're going to be in chapter 1 alone tomorrow. Let me double check that real fast, make sure I give you an appropriate the appropriate information. Let's see. We are going to be, tomorrow is the 8th. Yep, we're going to be in 1 Chronicles chapter 1 tomorrow. 1 Chronicles chapter 1. So if you have any pre-reading you want to do for Chronicles, please feel free to do that. Tomorrow's text is purely part of a genealogy. So what I'm going to do is just give some introductory information for 1 Chronicles, and then we might make a couple of notes about various people who are mentioned within this particular text of this genealogy, tracing from Adam through Abraham in tomorrow's reading of 1 Chronicles chapter 1. If you have any questions about what we've read in 2 Kings or 1 Kings or anything we've mentioned up to this point, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below, and I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me today. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday. Looking forward to reading with you again tomorrow, and looking forward to our worship tomorrow together as well. Take care, and God bless.